Hello, my name is Sam Hamilton, and I'm a first-year painting candidate. American culture is so individualistic that we've forgotten how to express and feel empathy for others and what their situation might be. We don't think about the systems and circumstances that put them there, but we do put the blame on that individual. The paintings work to humanize statistics we might see or might overlook because we are overwhelmed by numbers. They represent the people of our communities, who they might be, and who are directly affected by the statistics presented. I want those statistics to feel really tangible and tactile. I love working with texture in work. I want to be able to feel the paint or materials I'm working with at the time without actually having to touch the surface of the artwork. I work traditionally and not digitally because of the disconnect between my hand and the final product. I can't feel the media moving and forming like with traditional work. The viewer is only given a base entry point to this information from my work. They should investigate and educate themselves of something they might not know a lot about, but affects others in their community and maybe even themselves. They should form their own opinion once they've gathered the information, rather than for me to give them my own opinion. Different ideologies and belief systems can coexist in communities, but when we are not informed about our opinions or only choose to surround ourselves with those like us, we have isolated ourselves from our community at large, and this is particularly harmful when we hold a privilege in our community and social systems.
I really like printmaking because it's the media of like the middle class, mainly paintings that are really hard to acquire versus print. Prints are really easy to acquire. My process in art making, I go into the desert or even abandoned areas, and I take photographs of items left behind, and it could be a part of a part of someone's history. My printmaking choice of media is woodcuts and screen prints. I mainly like to use mulberry paper or Stonehenge paper, and I like to puzzle all my images together. That way I could get a bigger image. Yeah, I like to get all these images and collide them together and get some type of dimensions off from the wall. I'm currently attending Colorado State University to further enhance the visual disciplines and gain knowledge in the field of installation. I am teaching assistant for printmaking with Associate Professor Johnny Castillo. Just from transferring from Texas to Colorado, it is not easy moving from place to place, and just moving on itself, we do tend to lose a lot of objects just in the process. And I think those are the most important things those objects that are left behind are the objects that I'm mostly concerned about. Those are the objects that could tell a history about a person. People can leave behind loved ones, they can leave behind photographs, they can leave behind a lot of different things.
The body of work that I'm developing right now stems from a very deep dive into packaging materials. The part that I think I'm most interested has to deal with the way in which it functions. And I think that packages and shipping containers and things that enclose and protect the objects that we surround ourselves on a day-to-day basis, especially now more than ever when online shopping is such a huge industry. I think there's something that we really take for granted, and I think that they are these really highly engineered, thoughtful, and specialized objects that really kind of exist in a state of flux. They have this really important function, and then as soon as they fulfill it, they are useless and are discarded. The work with the packaging materials really kind of started solely as a formal investigation of form and material, and as I began to push the materials further and further past their intended functions, I really began to uncover and develop a more specific formal language that pointed really directly towards architecture. And I think that the functional and engineered qualities of the packaging material are really much more similar to architecture and constructed spaces than I had realized. And so I began to lean much more heavily into that connection, and that's where this body of work is moving forward now. It's a very intentional combination of architectural influences with packaging material influences, and this body of work also began to highlight very specific hierarchies of material. And so by combining materials like cardboard and foam with architectural materials like cement and brass, the conversations between them really start to reveal the sorts of biases and expectations we have regarding material. If we can acknowledge the stratification of value in something as simple as material, I think that this work can provide a space for the contemplation of hierarchies at a grander social scale. And that's where I'd like this work to go, and that's what I'm doing with it.
Hello, and welcome to my studio space.
By simplifying problems to black and white, my work exposes the complications inherent to the shades of gray of my own lived existence. To understand my own complicated identity, I use binary solutions. By imposing black and white parameters onto my art making, I look to simplify ways of understanding my own lived experience. This process helps me find connections to the world around me that speak universally. As a record of both time and movement, my art becomes a coping mechanism when I cannot find the language to define or describe the things I strive to comprehend. My work revolves around repetitive processes embedded within seemingly arbitrary mechanistic parameters. These acts of repetition offer structure and control, but quickly turn obsessive and even drive the aesthetic by overcomplicating existing disparities. Infusing computer-related tools and technology into my making processes, I further my exploration of binaries by mixing them with the handmade. These acts begin the conversation between the machine and my body by contrasting the abilities and limitations of each. Because communication within computers are set to binary logic, my own biases lead to the assumption that it alone can reconcile the ideas infused in my work. Looking back at records of routine, these rubbings were taken from the floor beneath my feet every 10 minutes over 10-hour periods on 10 different days. They reflect both the physical place of their taking as well as the action of impression in the manner they're taken. This work, speaking towards timelines, routine, and repetition, led into drawing with thread. The acrylic thread drawing series, entitled Please Touch, is the first excursion I took in truly entwining the machine-made with the handmade. Cam threads, while changing scale, has the handmade following the path of the tool that came before it. This reciprocal relationship with the machine was followed again in tracings. This work chronologies a pattern made with the use of machines in both design and its first implementation, but then is traced by hand in 275 sequential iterations. The breakdown of the pattern exemplifies miscommunication known to occur within the body. Ghost is my most current work. It keeps building on the dichotomy between body and machine. Using a hexagonal pattern tool and a machine-drawn pattern on butcher paper, I embroider the pattern into layers of tulle that have been sculpted on the wall. The red thread pulls away from itself in the wall, out into space. The pattern becomes muddled through the body's movements and weaving before it is lost. At first glance, these works seem quite simple in terms of material use and production, but it's in the making, the physical labors of rule setting and doing, that the binary connections once made to shed light on a topic at hand become muddled and reveal it's complicated. Thanks for stopping by.
Hi, my name's Clark Valentine. I'm an artist from Colorado Springs, Colorado, and I'm currently a second-year MFA candidate in the Department of Drawing here at Colorado State University. My work is really rooted around the phenomenological experience of mark making itself. So the practice of drawing to me is about the moment where the pen touches the paper and what happens in that process of making. So what I do is I usually set up some sort of rule system, and every artist is deciding certain rules in their work. So I decide what paper I'm using, what materials I'm using, and then I set up some loose boundaries, such as like the frame of it, and then I also make my first mark. And after I've made that first mark, every mark that succeeds that is a response to what's come before. So each mark is attempting to be a unique repetition of the mark that came before, but through all of the errors of the hand. As that goes, every error of the hand becomes this new moment of response. I have to constantly adapt. So the phenomenological experience of the mark making is trying to set aside expectations or demands of the hand and allowing the hand to kind of flow very smoothly. I kind of find these times where I'm not consciously making choices anymore. My hand's moving of its own accord on my work, and the work is just kind of building itself, and I just become kind of the vehicle for that movement. I think in a lot of ways my work becomes a documentation of the movement of the body. That references back to abstract expressionism, but I think in a little bit of a different way. Instead of the frantic gestural mark making of people such as Pollock, instead the record of the mark making is of this slow contemplative process. And the hand moves slowly and thoughtfully and intentionally, but still of its own accord. A lot of my research is rooted in mystical philosophy. Currently, I'm researching a lot of Zen practice and Taoist practices. My independent study right now is going around the state of Colorado and interviewing practitioners and artists who are engaged in this type of dialogue. So talking with Taoist and Zen practitioners and also artists who are coming from a Zen or minimalist tradition and seeing the way that they talk about the movement of the body and how that evokes ideas of the spirit or of Eastern philosophy. Currently, I'm working really small, kind of in light of the pandemic. I was really forced to go from working on really large scale pieces. The last piece I did before the pandemic started was 9 feet by 12 feet. And then as we went into COVID-19 and having to work from home instead of in a studio space, I started working instead of 9 by 12 feet, I was working 9 by 12 inches. And I found an intimacy in that work that I didn't have before. So I think my goals for this year and going forward in my work is to work larger, to have these large scale works that I'm really drawn to, but be able to maintain the intimacy of looking that mirrors and parallels my mark making experience. When I'm making my marks, I'm so close to the work. My face is just inches from it. I would hope that my viewer takes the time to look closely at that work and to see each individual mark and how, as a whole, it builds into a sum greater than all of its parts.
My practice focuses on sexual health in America. I'm interested in the social stigmas related to STDs and sexual health. There's an area of taboo within sexual health of the private versus the public, where what we talk about with a doctor can be very different than what we talk about with friends. And I feel that there's a lot of information that gets carried with that. I'm also fascinated in the social burdens of STDs placed on women. There's this weight that women carry when it comes to sexual health, whether it's the annual visits, the having severe symptoms of an infection leading them to be the main reporter of an STD that they acquire from a partner, and eventually with this happening there's the result of slut shaming. I feel my work creates conversation surrounding sexual health, whether it's talking to a person about your experience or talking to them about their experience. I feel like it can be very informative, whether it's because someone can't get to a doctor or whether it's because of the information that they've been given through sexual education in high school has been so skewed towards abstinence and less towards information. I feel that my work creates the conversation or allows for conversation surrounding sexual health. I also think about STDs as far as how do we acquire them? How do they affect us? Who do they affect? I feel that there is a very different sense of STDs amongst gender, class, race. And so breaking down those stigmas is a main driving factor within my practice.
With sample 1, I use a lot of visual imagery relating to HPV and the female organs. I use layers to show more directly the layering effects of the disease itself on the body, using imagery of the HPV virus, the healthy cervix cells, and the adenocarcinoma that is caused, the cancer that is caused due to the effects of HPV on the reproductive organs. I use gemstones and facets to add a sense of value to what happens to a person. I feel like a lot of stigma relating to STDs kind of devalues a person, either mentally, physically, emotionally. And so using these more precious objects kind of allows for me to recognize the struggle and bring a sense of value back to the person.